Okay. So we left off last week. We set the scene last week to discuss the idea that a rabbi's rights to give a decision and to give a shiur and to give halachic psak is limited because we set out last week, right at the beginning, this idea that somebody is not allowed to give a psak in the presence of his rabbi, of his own rabbi. So somebody who taught him, somebody who gave him smicha, is not allowed to give a psak or even to teach Torah in the presence of his rabbi. So we're going to learn now what it means in the presence of his rabbi. So let me see if I can find the screen for you. Okay, can you all see the screen with the text? Yeah, okay, good. So, what's this chat here? Okay, we can do that afterwards. Right, so this is where we got up to. Tanchum, Berei de Rabbi Ami. Tanchum is a fellow's name, the son of Rabbi Ami, Ikla lechatar. He went to this place called Chatar. If you have a look over here, at the bottom of the right-hand side on the page here, Rav Steinsaltz says that some commentaries say this is a place next to Tyre, which is known as Tzur in the Gemarah. And it's called of this because the waves of the sea, choter, they dig and gnaw at the sandy rocks of the shore. Others say that Chatar is an abbreviation of Chad Atar, meaning one space. Atar, by the way, is a modern Hebrew word for site, as in website. So if you want to go to the website of somebody, then you will go to their atar. So there you have a modern Hebrew word coming from, possibly from this name here of this Gemarah, in this Gemarah. So Tanchum went to this place. Doesn't really matter where the place was, except, I suppose it does in a minute, you'll see. Darash lahu, he taught them. Darash, he taught them. He taught the people there a halacha. And this is a very strange halacha that he taught them. It's not actually relevant to our subject, but it's an interesting halacha he taught them. Mutar lil tot chitin bapesach. It's permitted to wash wheat in water on Pesach. How on earth could that be allowed? Can you imagine the rabbis today allowing such a thing? They go crazy if there's a drop of dew goes anywhere near their wheat for Pesach. Having said that, Tanchum came along and said it's permitted to wash the wheat in water. And what this process was apparently when you're trying to get the bran from the wheat, in other words, to get the kernel that you're going to grind away from the klipa, the covering of it, the shell, if you like. They used to wash it in water. That used to loosen up the bran, as it's called. Now, we certainly wouldn't be able to do that today because any wheat plus water equals chametz in our book. But they, in those days, allowed it. And the reason that they allowed it was that the way you did this was you washed this wheat, and then you ground the kernels straight away. You ground them straight away and made your flour. So there was obviously no time for this to become chametz. Chametz is only when it lasts for water and flour for 18 minutes without it being baked. So it was this was allowed at that time. Now, it was not allowed very shortly after that, because none of the Rishonim, none of the early commentators, that's the medieval commentators, none of them comment that it is allowed today. They all comment. Rashi, for example, says that was allowed in those days, but it's not allowed in our days. This was another example of our halacha changing, and often what it does was it changes lechumrah, to be more strict as time goes on. And that's what's happened here. But nevertheless, that's what Tanchum taught these people in Qatar. And Amru lo, they said to him, the people there said to him, hey, hang on a minute. Lav Rabbi Mani de min Tzur ikahacha. Is not Rabbi Mani from Tyre, from Tzur, is he not here in the area? That's why I think the commentaries thought that Qatar was close to Tyre, because Rabbi Mani comes from Tyre, from Tzur. So I think that's why they assumed this place was close by. They said to him, hang on a minute, Rabbi Mani's here. V'tanya, and have we not learned in a Braita, Talmid, a pupil, al yoreh halacha, must not teach halacha, bimkom rabo, in the place of his Rebbe, of his teacher. Just going back before we finish off the sentence, see that word there again, yoreh. You'll be familiar with that word yoreh, because remember when Reb Chia went to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi and asked for permission for his nephews to be able to teach, the question was yoreh. Yoreh. Is he allowed to teach? Yes, he's allowed to teach. Yoreh, as we've said before, is what a rabbi receives when he receives smicha. He receives permission. It's called yoreh. So Talmid al yoreh. Al means not allowed. Al yoreh, do not teach. A Talmid must not teach halacha bimkom rabo, in the place of his Rebbe. What does that mean, in the place of? And the next part of the sentence tells you that. Ela im kain haya rachok mimenu shalosh parsaot. Unless, ela im kain means unless. That's a little phrase which you do well to remember. It's a common phrase. Ela im kain, literally, only if so. Literally, ela, only, im, if, kain, so. Only if so. Or unless haya rachok mimenu, he is distant from him by a distance of shalosh parsaot, 3 parsa. Parsa is a distance. Keneged machane Yisrael, which corresponds to the space that was taken up by the camp of Israel in the desert, when they were going through the desert. So we have to understand what's this got to do with the price of cheese. Why 3 parsa? First of all, how far is a parsa? A parsa is the distance that an average man can walk in 72 minutes, which is approximately 4 kilometers. A parsa is approximately 4 kilometers. 3 parsaot, therefore, is approximately 12 kilometers. It's around about 7.5 miles. So a Talmid is not allowed to give psak halacha, is not allowed to give a ruling in the place of his Rebbe unless he is 7.5 miles away. Now, what's this got to do with the camp of Israel? We learn in the Torah itself that there was a situation where Moshe Rabbeinu was sitting around giving answers to questions, and only he was doing so. Let's see. It's a bit of a difficult question, this. Let's see if David Marks can tell us where that is. David, where do we read in the Torah of Moshe sitting and giving psak halacha? We can't hear you. If you're there, we can't see you and we can't hear you. I don't know. Maybe he's not there. Okay, I'll have to tell you then. So it is in Parashat Ki Tisa, chapter 33 of Shemot. Oh, there you are, David. You're there. Go on.
Yeah, go on.
It's in
Moshe
verse.
yikach et ha'ohel.
Yes,
Kara lo ohel moed.
That's right. Excellent. Well done. Moshe yikach et ha'ohel. Moshe will take the tent. V'nata lo michutz lamachaneh. He'll take it outside the camp. Harchek min ha'machaneh, away from the camp. V'kara lo ohel moed. And it will be called there a tent of meeting. V'haya, and it will be kol mevakesh Adonai, anybody who seeks Hashem, in other words, he wants to know what to do. Yetzei el ohel moed, he will go out to the tent of meeting where Moshe is sitting, Hashem ichutz lamachaneh, which is outside the camp. V'haya, and it will be ketzet Moshe el ohel. When Moshe goes out from the Ohel, Yakumu kol ha'am, all the people will stand, v'nitzvu ish petach ohalo, and they will stand up in the entrance to their tent, v'hibitu acharei Moshe, and they will look at the back of Moshe ad ba'o hala, and until he comes to the tent. That, by the way, is the origin of the halacha that one must stand up when the rabbi comes in. So you'll all be familiar with that. When the rabbi stands, we stand. When the rabbi comes into the room, we stand. And this is the origin of that halacha, that when Moshe was to go out to the Ohel Moed, people would stand up in their tent and give him kavod, give him honor. But the first part is the important part for our Gemarah. Moshe was to take the tent and take it to the edge of the camp, and there he would sit and give his psak halacha. Now, the camp of Israel was a diameter. Yes, that's right, isn't it? A diameter of 3 parsah, which means that the furthest person apart from Moshe in the Ohel Moed, the furthest person away from the Ohel Moed, was 3 parsah away, was 3 lots of 72 minutes worth of walking. So in other words, it would have taken somebody to go and ask Moshe a shaila. It would have taken him the best part of 3.5 hours, more than 3.5 hours. To arrive at Moshe's tent to get the answer, and then 3.5 hours back to his home. So it was not quite so easy as it is these days just to send an email to the rabbi and saying, or a WhatsApp asking your question. They had to go out to Moshe. Now, we learn from here that nobody else was giving psak halacha until we had the situation with Moshe's father-in-law in Parashat Yitro, where he said, "Hey, hang on a minute, this is no good. We need to split the responsibilities here." Yitro said to Moshe, "You're going to wear yourself out, and what's more, you're going to wear the people out, because they're going to have to stand in line for hours and hours to ask you questions. We need to set up a system of justice." David Marks, where will I find Yitro's advice, please? He's gone again. Well, I'll tell you.
I said, I'm here, right at the beginning of Parashat Yitro.
Okay, correct.
In Sheni, Shlishi.
Right, okay. So I'm in...
Which interestingly is before Ki Tisa.
Yes, it is, correct. That's one of the reasons why the rabbis tell us that the Torah is out of order in Ki Tisa. Ki Tisa is the Sedra of the Egel, and it's all out of order. So here we go.
According to some.
According to some, yes. According to some. According to most, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So what did he say? If you're right, it's actually in Shani. He says here, Vayar choten Moshe, and the father-in-law of Moshe, that's Yitro, saw Eit kol asher hu oseh la'am, all that he was doing to the people. The previous pasuk said, Vayeshev Moshe lishpot et ha'am. Moshe sat to judge the people. Vayamod ha'am al Moshe min ha'boker ad ha'erev, and the people stood there asking their questions or waiting to ask their questions from morning till night. This is the origin of the the Hasidic Rebbes, where you stand there from morning till night waiting for your brocha. They all think they're Moshe Rabbeinu. Anyway, Yitro comes along and says, Vayoma, and he says, Ma davar zeh asher ata oseh? What's this thing that you're doing, la'am, to the people? Madua ata yoshev levadecha? Why are you sitting alone? V'chol ha'am nitzav alecha min boker ad arev, and all the people are standing there all day. Vayomer Moshe lechotno, and Moshe said to his father-in-law, Ki yavo elai ha'am lidrosh Elohim, they've come to ask me halachas. They don't know what to do. I'm teaching them. And then it goes on to say, Vayomer choten Moshe ilav, Yitro says to him, Lo tov hadavar asher ta'aseh. What you are doing is no good. Navol tibol gamata gam ha'am. You'll not cope with this. You'll wither away, says Steinsaltz. You'll wither away. A great expression. Ki chaved mimcha hadavar. Lo tuchal asu levadecha. You can't do this alone. And then he goes on to say what you've got to do. He tells us that what we have to do is to arrange for a court system, lower courts, higher courts. This is the basis of the hierarchy of the justice system. And Moshe says that's a good idea, and he goes on to do it. But what we do see is that prior to Yitro's intervention, Moshe was the only one giving out halacha. And from there we learn that nobody else, until he had this permission given, nobody else could give psak halacha in Moshe's presence. And that's why our Gemarah, why have I gone into all that detail, is because of these three words in the Gemarah. Ela im keina yarachot mimenu shlosh parsaot keneged machana Yisrael. According to the camp of Israel was 3 parsaot in diameter, meaning that the furthest person away was 3 parsaot. So that means that nobody within 3 parsaot of your own teacher is allowed to give halacha. That's what we've learned from this piece of Gemarah. There is actually a bit of a question on that, which some of the Mefarshim actually raise. Can any of you think of a question which arises from this halacha of 3 parsaot keneged machane Yisrael? Okay, I'll tell you because it's a bit difficult, and I skipped over it fairly quickly. When Moshe took the tent and he made it into the Ohel Moed, excuse me, let me just get rid of that call. Sorry. When Moshe took the Ohel Moed, the Torah tells us that he took it a distance from the edge of the camp. He wasn't right on the edge of the camp. The Mefarshim tell us he was 1 parsa away. Or was it 1 mil? No, it was 1 mil away. A mil is a quarter of a parsa. Okay, so if a mil is 4 kilometers, if a parsa is 4 kilometers, a mil, that's where the word mile comes from, probably. A mil is about 1 kilometer. So he was 1 kilometer outside the camp. So really, this should be shalosh parsaot, 3 parsaot, plus 1 mil, keneged machane Israel, because the furthest person away had to go the 3 parsaot of the diameter of the camp and another quarter of a parsa, another mil, to Moshe's Ohel Moed. So really the question that you should have asked is that this is not quite accurate. it should be that you're not allowed to give a psak halacha in a distance of 3.25 parsaot to Moshe, to your teacher, because that was the furthest person away to Moshe Rabbeinu. And they answer that question by saying that Moshe Rabbeinu was not like anybody else, and therefore he got an extra mil. And so we don't add that extra mil onto everybody else, and we are satisfied that a pupil should not give his psak within 3 parsaot, 12 mil, approximately 7.5 miles of his Rebbe, unless there are certain circumstances which pertain. So in other words, there are some caveats. So when they told Tanchum this, he was a bit upset because he realized he shouldn't have done that. And he said, Oy ve'zmir, Amalahu, he said to them, Lav adatai, I didn't know. I was ignorant of the fact that my Rabbi Mani was in the area, which I think is probably responsible for the other opinion that says that Qatar was not necessarily close to Tzur, because if it had been close to Tzur, then you would, Tanchum, if it was within the 3 parsaot of Tzur at least, then you would have expected Tanchum to either know or ought to have known that Rabbi Mani might have been in the vicinity because he came from Tzur. So I think you can learn from the fact that Tanchum had no idea that his rabbi was in the vicinity, that probably the place where he was, whether it was called Qatar or whether it was just a place, was probably more than 3 parsa from Tzur. So that's what he did. That's what Tanchum did. He did something and then said, I didn't know. Okay. Now, we're going to relate something which is supposedly related to this. The Gemara goes off at another one of his famous tangents, and this is supposedly related to what we just learned. It's not so obvious at first why this is connected. So don't read the end of the bit, and don't read the notes at the left-hand side here until we've actually done this piece of Gemara. And Leon, don't read the art scroll, but you've probably already done it. Yes, of course you have. Okay, so Rabbi Chia, the same Rabbi Chia that we had last week, getting smicha for his nephews. Rabbi Chia chazye lahahu gavra. Rabbi Chia saw a certain man. Dahava ka'e beveit hakfarot. He was standing in a cemetery. Amalei, he said to him, Lav ben ish ploni kohen ata? Are you not the son of so-and-so the Kohen? Implication, you shouldn't be here in this cemetery. You're a Kohen. Mervyn will not be going to any cemeteries unless it's a very close relative, because he's a Kohen. And if he does go to a cemetery, there's a special section for the Kohanim to stand in, because generally speaking, Kohanim are not allowed to go to a cemetery, because there is halacha that Kohanim are not allowed to become tamei met, are not allowed to become defiled, become impure from a dead body, and that includes being in the vicinity of a dead body of 4 amot. And so it is traditional that a Kohen does not go to a cemetery. This fellow was the son of a Kohen. So what's he doing there? Amalei, the man said to Rabbi Chia, in. Now, the word in is very, very confusing, because in modern Hebrew and in biblical Hebrew, the word ein, which is spelled exactly the same, means no or not. But in the Gemara, in Aramaic, the word in means completely the opposite. It means yes. Now, it took me quite a while to figure that out when I was learning Gemara. Couldn't figure it out at all. Why I couldn't make head nor tail of the Gemarah because I was translating in as no, because I knew that ein meant no or not. But actually, you just have to remember it. In means yes in Gemarah language. So he said, yes, I am the son of so-and-so the Kohen. And then he says something very interesting about his father. Abua dahahu, no, he doesn't say it, the Gemarah says it. Abua dahahu gavra gava einayim hava. The man of this, the father of this man, in other words, this Ploni, this so-and-so, that Rabbi Chia says, aren't you the son of so-and-so? This so-and-so fellow was a man who raised his eyes. Gava. See that word gava? You'll know that word from Hagba, but Hagbaha. When you do that in shul and you do Hagba, you lift up the Sefer Torah. That's what the word means, to raise up. That's what you're doing when you do Hagba. Gava einayim are eyes. This man raised his eyes up. What does that mean? What does that mean? He went looking at stuff he shouldn't have been looking at. Right? He's raised his eyes. And he shouldn't have been looking at these things. And what did he look at? Natan einav. He gave his eyes, or he placed his eyes, Vigurusha, on a divorced woman. He shouldn't have been looking at this divorced woman, but he did. And what happens when you look at a woman? You end up marrying her. And that's what he did. He placed his eyes on this divorcee and he married her. Now, we all know that a Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. But what happens if he does? He's not allowed to. What happens if he does? The next word tells us, v'chilalu. The situation is called, what results is called a halal. Now, have you ever heard of the word chilul Hashem? Sure you have. A chilul Hashem is when you do something which reflects very badly on Hashem's name. So you are a very obvious Torah Jew. You walk through the streets with your kippah and you do something which is bad behavior. You spit on the ground, or you push an old lady over, or you do something really horrible. And people around you, oh, sorry about this. People around you say, oh, look at that frum Jew. He's badly behaved. That's how frum Jews behave. I don't have anything to do with them. That is called a chilul Hashem. Now, the word chilul means profane. You profane the name of Hashem. In other words, you disgrace the name of Hashem by your bad behavior and by people being able to categorize you as somebody who is in God's camp, as it were. And by behaving badly, you are profaning the name of Hashem. You're reflecting badly on Hashem. I remember when I was a kid, whenever I was badly behaved, my father would say to me, it reflects on your parents. That's what I got told. If I was badly behaved, it reflects on your parents. And not that I was badly behaved very often, but if I was, that was what I got. Jeffrey, you got that as well, I'm sure, yes? Yes, of course. It reflects on your parents. Reputation is everything. And by being badly behaved, it reflects on your parents. And if you are an obvious Torah Jew, it reflects badly on Hashem if you do a chilul Hashem. So what's this got to do with our Kohen? A Kohen who marries a divorcee profanes the kihuna. It reflects badly on the priesthood. He has profaned and spoiled his priesthood. And what happens is that any offspring from that union, from that forbidden union of the Kohen and the Gerusha, the divorcee, the Kohen is called a Kohen Halal, a profaned Kohen. Now, a profaned Kohen means that he is still a Kohen, because his father was a Kohen. But he is not a full Kohen in that he does not get Kohanic privilege. He does not get called up to the first Aliyah, as Mervyn does. He does not, in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, does not receive the matnat kahuna, the gifts that the Kohen used to get from the people. So he does not have any of those privileges. He doesn't get to lead the benching. He doesn't get to be given the kavod, which is due to a Kohen. On the other hand, he also does not have the restrictions of a Kohen. And therefore, that is why he was able to go into the cemetery. So when Rabbi Chia saw him and he said to him, "Hey, what are you doing here? Aren't you the son of so-and-so, the Kohen?" And he said, "Yes, I am." But presumably he then had to explain to Rabbi Chia that, "Yes, I am, but my father married a divorcee, and therefore I am a Kohen Halal, and I am therefore permitted to go into the cemetery." So what on earth is this got to do with the fact that we have just learned earlier, which is that a person is not allowed to give psak halacha in front of his Rebbe or within 7.5 miles of his Rebbe? So the commentators ask the question. It's an obvious question, and Rashi says that what we're not told on here, and clearly we're meant to have sort of figure it out for ourselves, or at least Rashi figured it out for us, is that Rabbi Chia, as we know, was a pupil of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. And we can assume from this that the Gemara is teaching us that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi was in the area, and therefore Rabbi Chia had no right to be going telling this person that he shouldn't be in the cemetery. Forget that he should have been in the cemetery, or he could have been in the cemetery because he was a Kohen Halal. The fact is Rabbi Chia didn't know that, and he was giving him a piece of advice and saying, "Oi, Kohen, you shouldn't be here. It's not allowed." He shouldn't have been doing that because his teacher, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, was around the area. So this Gemara is here to teach us that one of the caveats to that rule of not teaching in front of your Rebbe or in the place of your Rebbe is that if there is a need to teach somebody something immediately to prevent them from doing something wrong. So, for example, let's say I was to go to a certain area in Jerusalem, close to where, within 7.5 miles of where Rabbi Brovinder lives, and I was about to see a guy a Jewish person, let's say it's a person that I know, and I know he's particular about kashrut, and he's about to go into the local McDonald's, which I know does not have a hechsher. And he might think that it does, because he's here in Israel, and isn't everything kosher in Israel? Yes, no, unfortunately it isn't. But some people, some visitors don't understand that, especially first-time visitors. I would be allowed to say to this fellow, "Oi, be careful, I don't think that place is kosher. You need to check out whether it's kosher." That I would not be in violation of this rule. I don't just stand by and let him do it because I have to say, "No, I'm sorry, Rabbi Brovinder's round the corner, and so I'm not allowed to give psak halacha." No. If this is what this Gemara is teaching us, Rabbi Chia saw this bloke there and then in the cemetery, and he says, "You shouldn't be here." And the fact that he said that demonstrates to us, and if you like, refines and defines the halacha. I have to turn that one off as well. Gosh, I'm busy populous this morning, aren't I? This Gemara refines and defines the halacha the prohibition of teaching in front of one's Rebbe is put aside in a case where you can prevent somebody from doing something wrong. Yes, David, you'll have to unmute yourself. David Marks, unmute yourself and ask me your question.
Okay, so extending this principle, if you're in Yerushalayim and you're not giving a psak halacha to stop somebody from committing an aveira, but you've got a friend there, and he wants to ask you a shaila for you to pasken on the spot. Do you therefore say, I have to defer to my Rov, who is in this vicinity, or can you respond and give a psak halacha?
Okay, that is exactly the question that we're dealing with now, correct? The answer, the simple answer is no, I'm not allowed to do so, unless I have permission to do so from that Rebbe. Now, you'll see that it's not quite so straightforward, that it's assumed. Now, so when you get your smicha and you go, and I went to Rabbi Brovinder to get my certificate. He gave me my certificate, and he then gave me permission to pasken halacha. The certificate itself allows me to pasken halacha. Like we said last week's shiur, why did these people need to get smicha in the first place? Because he had to be satisfied that I could enunciate my words clearly enough. First of all, that I knew what I was talking about, and secondly, that I knew how to speak, and that we wouldn't get mixed up between marsh water and albumin of eggs, like those poor people over there did. So that's what you get from your certificate. But then he has to give you specific permission to pasken halacha and to say Torah in his vicinity, and that is part of the smicha process. Some people don't give it, and therefore their pupils, according to this halacha, would not be able to answer that question. They would indeed have to defer to their own rabbi. Now, it's not quite so straightforward, because when you look into this carefully, somebody who is called a talmid muvhak. A talmid muvhak is somebody who is how would you translate talmid muvhak? A premier pupil, if you like, the number one pupil, a very close pupil. For example, my Rebbe in medical halacha issues, Rabbi Professor Abraham, who was a consultant cardiologist in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital, was also a great rabbi and author of halacha known as the Nishmat Abraham. He was a talmid muvhak. He was a very, very close pupil of Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who you may have heard of, one of the greatest poskim of the late 20th century. He was very careful never to give a psak halacha in the vicinity of Reb Shlomo Zalman, because he was a talmid muvhak. There's a halacha that says even if the rabbi gives permission, if you are a talmid muvhak, you're not allowed to do so, and you shouldn't do so. It can be fraught. However, there's another part to this halacha which says that if all of your teachers give you permission, then you have a free reign, except for your Rebbe Muvhak, the one that you are a Talmid Muvhak from. So the answer to your question, David, is actually yes, that's what one should do. Unless one has been given permission, one should not pasken within 7.5 miles of one's Rebbe, which could be quite difficult, of course, if you are in a town. If you live in the town where your rabbi lives, you're never going to be able to answer a question unless he gives you that permission. So that is why the permission is sort of automatically granted, as it were, when you get the smicha. Okay, so that's why we brought this case here as to Rabbi Chia and the fellow in the cemetery. So now we can look at the notes that Rabbi Steinsaltz gives us. Rashi writes a lengthy comment to attempt to explain why this incident is recorded here. Among his suggestions, the possibility that Rabbi Chia spoke to the man even though his teacher Rabbi Yehuda Nossi was in the vicinity. Although, as the Gemarah stated, it is ordinary and prohibited for a Torah scholar to issue halachic rulings based on a teacher. This account teaches an important exception to the rule. when the instruction is immediately necessary to prevent someone from violating a prohibition, it is permitted for the scholar to issue instructions. That's what we've just said. Others give a different explanation. The case of the son of the priest is similar to the incident of the kneading of the dough in impurity, as they are both scenarios in which someone appeared to be violating a prohibition in public, and the sages requested clarification from that individual. Remember the case of the kneading the dough? The rabbi turned up and he said, what's going on here? You're kneading dough in impure vessels. You shouldn't be doing that. And they said, it's okay. We're doing it with marsh water. And that's okay because this fellow told us, turns out that marsh water wasn't okay. And what he really meant was egg albumin. But they thought that it was okay. So it was clarifying a situation to do with impurity. And that's why this case is brought here. I don't like that explanation because in between the two cases, we've got the case of Tanchum, who paskened in the place of his rabbi. So if the second explanation here was the correct explanation, I would have expected this Rabbi Chia bit of the Gemarah here to be before this Tanchum bit. It should have been over here where my pointer is here. Then it would make sense, because previously we've been talking about the marsh water and the egg albumin. It would have made sense to put it here to say here or here to say. And by the way, here's another example of somebody getting the wrong impression to do with impurity. But the fact that it comes after the piece of Gemarah talking about not paskening halacha in front of your rabbi gives me the impression that the first explanation here in Steinsaltz, which Rashi goes into, is the correct explanation of why this is connected to our Gemarah. Okay, any questions there before we go on and do a bit more? Yes, Jeffrey.
It mentions Tyre. Now, is that the same Tyre of Hiram of Tyre?
Yes, Hiram, yes. It's up in the north near to
I know
Damascus.
where it is.
Yeah.
I know. So it's very interesting. Obviously, that was a city that was, if you like, conquered by or inhabited by the Greeks, and yet here's a prominent Rav living there.
Okay, let me see.
A sizable community there.
Yes, Tyre was definitely a sizable community. Let me see if are we still sharing screen?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the map that I showed you in the Shoftim Shir on Sunday. Remember, we were down here, right? In our Shir.
It's not on the screen now.
Johnny, we can't see it.
You can't see it?
The map's
Okay.
not on.
No, it was there and now it's gone.
Okay, let me try and reshare it. Have you got it now? Yeah.
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Right. So we were on Sunday, and the Shoftim Shir, we were talking about Dan and Ephraim and Shiloh.
Yeah.
Okay. Now on the same map, if I just go north,
right.
Can you see Tyre?
Yeah.
And look where Tyre is. It's in the territory of
Asher.
So this was part of biblical Israel.
Okay.
Today it's part of Syria. But in the time of Yehoshua, the time of the
Lebanon,
Shoftim,
actually.
Lebanon, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Lebanon. Quite right, Jeffrey. Sorry. Today it's part of Lebanon. But in biblical Hebrew, in biblical times, Tyre was part of biblical Hebrew, biblical Israel. So when those of us who believe in the concept of a greater Israel, Menachem Begin for one, he would include, never spoke about it much, he spoke mostly about over here, of Judea and Shomron, Yehuda and Shomron over here. But actually, Greater Israel, biblical Israel, goes up as far as Sidon over here, and certainly included Tyre. Tyre was an important place in Gemarah times. We know that for a fact because Rabbi Mani was there for a fact. It did indeed have a sizable Jewish community. So you're absolutely right to point that out, Jeffrey.
It would be very interesting if Lebanon voted to join the state of Israel rather than have Hamas and Hezbollah controlling them and Iran. The Christians who live mainly in that area of the Lebanon would be much safer under Eretz Yisrael.
Agreed. Politically unlikely, but agreed. So, yes, so that's Tyre. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, let me just go back to the Gemarah.
I have a question. Please. I would just like to know what the definition of teaching is. It's not a teacher who stands and delivers a sermon or educates in the way that you are doing now, but it seems to have a much wider compass that it encompasses giving opinions. Is it legal opinions and opinions on Halacha? Well, okay. Which are legal opinions. Is there anything else it encompasses?
Okay, it's a very good question, Julia, as usual. And there's the lawyer in you coming out, because actually it has a very narrow understanding, actually, because we're talking, remember, let's just go back. Can you see have we got the Gemarah on the screen now? Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's just go back over here. And what did we learn? Talmid al Yoreh Halacha bimkom Rabbo. A Talmid is not allowed to teach Halacha in front of his Rebbe. So the narrowest interpretation of that is the example that David Marks gave a few minutes ago, where somebody asks you a halachic question: is this permitted? Am I allowed to do this, that, or other? It's Shabbat. Am I allowed to pick up this thing? Am I allowed to write on Shabbat? Am I allowed to go swimming on Shabbat? Whatever it is, whatever a halacha is. That's what it means, the strictest sense of the word here. Al yoreh halacha bimkom rabbo. You would have to defer, as David Marks used that expression correctly, defer to your rabbi. Others would interpret that more broadly, to say that it's not correct to give a shiur, to give an opinion on anything in front of your Rebbe. But the strict, and I suppose the most correct interpretation of this is as it says, al yoreh. Remember that word yoreh. Yoreh is what gets you the smicha. Al yoreh halacha bimkom rabbo. You're not allowed to teach halacha. So it's actually, I think, a fairly narrow interpretation here. It wouldn't be the equivalent of giving a sermon. It wouldn't be the equivalent of learning a piece of Gemarah or learning Shoftim or any of those things. It would be limited to answering a halachic question. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? We've got a few more minutes left. I'll just introduce the next section ready for next week if there's no other questions. Yes, Jeff?
Just remind me what baraita is again. I'm sorry, Ma'am. A
baraita comes from the word bar out, to be outside. A baraita was the parts of the Mishnah that never made it into the final version. There was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi who arranged the Mishnah, had, as it were, on his table hundreds, thousands of different opinions about all sorts of things. He had to choose which ones went into the Mishnah to be the final definitive Mishnah. There were other things that, as it were, never made it to the final cut. These were sort of, left on the cutting room floor. They were still valuable and they were still important, but they don't have the same halachic and legal strength and clout as the Mishnah itself. So they are statements of the rabbis, but they're statements that never made it into the final Mishnah.
Johnny?
Okay. So,
Johnny?
yeah. Yes, Howard.
I just want to ask Julia if she agrees that these are like obiter dicta in English court judgments. They're not the central decision, which are, my mind's gone blank. Julia, help me out. The ratio decidandi, but they're en passant. They're obiter dicta, and I can see Julia's nodding. It's quite important that tradition is carried forward into the law today, and it would apply to Israeli law, which follows the English common law.
That's really
I agree.
That's really interesting. It's also interesting that since we're learning Sanhedrin, that we have at least 3 lawyers that I can see.
4. There's 4.
Who's the 4th? Michael, are you a lawyer?
Sharon's a lawyer, I think.
Sharon's a lawyer. Okay.
And so is Larry. And so is Larry.
Okay, so we've got 5 lawyers then at learning Sanhedrin. So that's really interesting. That's really interesting. And I know that's why Leon asked me to learn Sanhedrin with him right at the beginning. So by the way, you've all got Leon to thank for this show. It was all his idea. I don't think he ever thought that we would have a dozen people on Zoom and then another 15, 20 people looking at it afterwards. The idea was that he and I would sit down and learn Sanhedrin, but these things have a way of taking a life of their own. Who could have predicted this? But it's interesting that our lawyers are learning Sanhedrin, and that's very interesting, Howard, that you point that out. That
just for Jeffrey's sake, to say they're en passant, as it were.
Yeah, en passant, for those who don't speak any French, that means sort of in passing, in passing. So yes, they are not the main laws, but those which are not to be discarded. Okay, in the last couple of minutes, let's just see what we're going to do next week. Please God. Okay, so we're over here. Pshita. Pshita means, from the word pashut. Pashut means simple. It's simple, or pshita, it's obvious. Okay, so if you say that something is pashut in modern Hebrew, that means it's straightforward, it's simple, it's obvious. Ze pashut. So pshita, it's obvious. La palga. Palga means is a Aramaic word. You can see the word poleg in there. I'm going to try and find a connection here. Palga means is equivalent to the Hebrew word of lechalek, to divide. So palga usually often means half, means divided. So pshita la palga, it's obvious from the previous story. Remember the story of Rava, who Julia was very, very upset for, because he did not get his yatir. He only got 2 out of the 3 smichas from Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and Julia was not happy about that. So that story teaches us that it's obvious, lapalga, that you can get partial or half or a split permission, because that's what happened to Rava. He got yore, he got yadin, but he didn't get yatir. So it's obvious that a person can get a partial smicha. Haka'ama demihani. That is what we've said above. We've already gone through that. That's obvious. So the Gemara now asks us a different question. Al tanai, is it possible that a person can get a conditional smicha? A conditional smicha. We know that a person can get a partial smicha. He can get a smicha for certain things, but not for others. But can he get a smicha al tanai, a conditional smicha. And we're going to stop there, and I'm going to stop the share so you can't read the notes, because I want you to think about it yourselves. And next week, I want you to come back and tell me some examples, if you can, of where it might be appropriate to give a conditional smicha. And that's what we're going to learn about next week. We're going to learn about the idea of conditional smicha. So, before I stop recording, are there any further questions that anybody wants to ask? Yes, Sharon.
No, it isn't a question. I was just moving my hair, but thank you for all the research you did in preparing for this conversation today.
You're welcome. Anybody else got any questions or additions they'd like to make? Okay, I'll stop recording now.